Senator Young and Delegate Young, so we're good. Feeling very young.
Forever young.
Nice.
I told my wife.
All right, so why don't we begin? Welcome everyone to the very first budget hearing of the Health and Social Services Subcommittee this year, jointly with the Senate Health and Human Services Subcommittee. We want to welcome everyone. We have 3 budget hearings today. We have the Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, we have the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, and we have the Maryland Health Professional Boards and commissions. Just a couple of quick reminders, and then I'm going to turn it over to my co-chair for additional comments. Normally at this time, we would tell everyone to silence their cell phones, but instead I'm going to tell everyone to just silence themselves. Use the mute button. As a reminder, if you have the mute button on and you would like to speak, you can actually press the space bar and your mute will temporarily be removed rather than fumbling for the mute icon at the bottom of your screen. With that, if you are scheduled to speak on a panel, then you will be led into the room, and everybody else will still be in the waiting room, and obviously everything can be followed on the live YouTube stream. So with that, I will turn it over to my co-chair, Senator Griffith from the Senate.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues. We're pleased to be participating in the first of what will be many joint sessions with you and your subcommittee members today. Certainly want to thank you for agreeing to start us off today. I did want to take this liberty and this opportunity to mention that we do have one new, and when I say new, not new to the Senate or the work of the General Assembly, but new to the Budget Committee and our subcommittee. Want to welcome Senator Young, who's joining our subcommittee for his first briefing today. And I don't know if you want to, I will just go ahead and introduce the rest of the members since there are only a few of us. Senator Eckert, who's probably the longest serving member on the subcommittee, and then the vice chair of BNT, Senator Rosapepe, is also here and will be with us throughout the session on this subcommittee. So we're happy to join you all. And members, just so you know, the chair and I met, and he's going to be leading this session while he's here. He will just call on anyone who has questions, so you can raise your hand either using the blue raise hand or raising your physical hand, and we'll try to keep an eye out for both of those. And I think there may be some special instructions about cameras, but I'll leave that to my co-chair. So that's all I have today, Mr. Chair. Thanks again for your starting us off.
All right, and with that, why don't we go ahead and begin with the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing and start with the analyst report on that. And I should remind everyone, I needed to be reminded of this earlier as well, to find the reports. If you go to the main General Assembly website, mgaleg.com or mgaleg.maryland.gov, and go to meetings, you'll be able to scroll down to this meeting and you can find the analyst reports linked right there. So I appreciate my vice chair reminding me of that earlier today, and we can go ahead and begin, and you can follow along using that document. Council? Grace? Oh, or Grace will just share her screen and put it up. That will be even better.
Does that look okay?
That looks great. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Grace Pedersen. It's my pleasure to present the Office of the Deaf and Hard of Hearing's Fiscal 2022 Budget Analysis. The Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing is the state's policy house on deaf and hard of hearing topics. So I'll start with this first graph here. The fiscal 22 allowance decreases about $10,000 or 2% from the fiscal 2021 working appropriation. As you can see in Exhibit 1 on page 2, most of the agency's budget is for personnel. Go Going down to the proposed budget changes, as I mentioned earlier, the budget decrease is about $10,000, and that's mostly due to the removal of a contractual position. And then I just have two key observations for you. The first one has to do with the quality of sign language interpreting services in the state. In response to the 2020 Joint Chairman's Report, the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing submitted a report summarizing the key elements of a successful state sign language interpreter policy, and then a couple of policy options that would be appropriate to implement in Maryland. In the report, the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing indicated that all states except Maryland have various degrees of standards protecting individuals from fraudulent or unqualified interpreters. Going to Exhibit 3 on page 6, the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights tracks the number of complaints filed by deaf and hard of hearing constituents, but over the past 5 years, no more than 14 complaints have been filed in a single year. However, in its testimony and during the 2020 session, the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing indicated that in the prior 4 years, it had received thousands of complaints, and that most of these complaints pertain to interpreters. So the Department of Legislative Services is recommending that the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing begin tracking that complaint data, in addition to data about the nature of complaints it receives. And then finally, these are the policy options bulleted here that the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing laid out in its report. And DLS is requesting the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing comment on whether any of the proposed policy options could affect the number of interpreters in the state and identify which policy option would be most appropriate to implement in Maryland. The second key observation I have for you pertains to sign language interpreting services procurement. So the state started tracking statewide expenditures on sign language interpreting services in fiscal 2018. Since the state started tracking this data, the states never spent less than $1 million on sign language interpreting services in a year. And in fiscal 2020, the state spent close to $1.7 million on interpreting services. So prior to calendar 2020, the state had a statewide contract for sign language interpreting services, and state agencies, but also local governments and nonprofits would use the statewide contract whenever they needed sign language interpreting services. The contract had some benefits, like it made it a little easier to procure interpreters, saving agencies some time, and the hourly cost of interpreting services was a little cheaper. However, the contract came with some challenges. State agencies reported numerous cancellations, and that sometimes the interpreters they did receive were unqualified or uncertified. And there were little enforcement capabilities built into the contract. So given these challenges, the contract was allowed to lapse at the end of calendar 2019. In the beginning of calendar 2020, the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing and the Department of General Services were working together to plan for a new statewide sign language interpreters services contract. However, a new RFP has still not been drafted. So the Department of Legislative Services is requesting the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing comment on the status of planning for that new contract and when they expect the new contract to be awarded. Then the last thing I have for you is DLS's recommended action. Here is the recommended committee narrative requesting that sign language interpreter complaint data. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time today. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Do any of the committee members have any questions for Grace?
Did we lose the chairman?
Do you see me or you hear me?
Okay,
Yeah,
now we
okay.
do. Yeah.
Let's see you. Okay.
Sorry, I'm having some technical difficulties. Give me one quick second. using the space bar as a mouse is interfering with something else I'm trying to open up. There we go. Okay. Let's bring on the department. Kelby Brick, are you with us today? There you are, Mr. Brick. Thank you for joining us, and please go ahead and begin your presentation.
And Mr. Chair, I neglected to tell our members that you may go off camera for this presentation and then join us back on camera.
Good afternoon, chairs, distinguished members of the committee. I am honored to be here at the first joint committee hearing. I feel honored, and to have the first budget heard within your committees. Thank you. I have submitted my formal testimony for the record, and I will not be reading my complete testimony, but I instead will just touch on some highlights that I would like to share while I have the opportunity today. I would thank first Grace Pedersen, for our legislative analyst, for her fantastic and thorough job. She always submits some very tough questions. Thank you. Over the past year, for various reasons which are obvious to all of us, it has been quite a challenge. Just a moment, let me have the interpreter will repin. Okay. Could we make sure that Director Brick is pinned for the audience to be able to see his testimony? Is he pinned?
Whoever's running the Zoom, can you please pin Mr. Brick?
He is pinned right now. There's a little bit of a delay on the live stream.
Great. Thank you, Nick.
Okay, thank you. Again, I guess that's one of the drawbacks. We're first on the list, and so we're all in a learning curve, I think, today. Zoom has presented benefits and challenges for all of us. It's a learning process. So we've had various challenges throughout the year, but we've also been quite proud of the work that the office has done throughout this year and throughout the many years. Our hard work has become quite obvious throughout this year. For example, we have set up a standardized process to make sure that the governor's press conferences and information to our citizens, our deaf and hard of hearing constituents, have accurate and timely information. We set this protocol up many years ago, and it is quite evident during the time of COVID. When COVID hit, we were ready to go. Many states have reached out to our office to ask, how did we have this set up? We have provided technical assistance to various other states, and now they have emulated our processes to make sure that deaf interpreters are provided with a hearing interpreter team for full access to information. We've also ensured that all of the state-run drive-through COVID testing centers have access and are accessible for all deaf, blind, hard of hearing individuals. This has also been emulated throughout the other states as well. We are proud to announce the implementation of text to 911. This has been a long time coming, but each county is now fully on board. And I'm proud to announce that last summer, text to 911 was released statewide. Obviously, there are implications for deaf and hard of hearing individuals to access 911 through these services, but it really impacts all citizens throughout the state, not limited to just our deaf and hard of hearing constituents. This benefits us all. For the past several years, we've really been working hard to increase the diversity within our advisory council. When I first entered office as director, it was mostly a white council, I have to say. It did not reflect the community that we serve. Through our hard work, I would like to say that we now have a very diverse council, which helps aid our work to the community. Our advisory council is far and away majority of women. More than half are people of color, and more than half are deaf. So we are proud to say that our advisory council is truly representing the state of Maryland, and we are hearing the community concerns. Not other states are this way. I just wanted to share some highlights of what has occurred throughout this past year. We've also faced some challenges. We are very optimistic and very hopeful that we can overcome any challenges that may come our way. But again, we do work hard to ensure access for all deaf and hard of hearing individuals throughout the state. Thank you. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the department? Vice Chair Valentino Smith.
Thank you. It looks like I started to put up multiple icons. Thank you. It's good to be here with the Senate, and thank you for the interpreter and for Executive Director Brick. My question is, thank you for all the work you're doing during COVID. I continue to be highly concerned on page 5, where once again this year we're faced with the fact that there are or have been thousands of complaints about interpreters, and that we remain the outlier in the nation, being the only state that doesn't have some kind of certification or otherwise requirements. And we see kind of the mixed messages in the JCR reports. One, there was a suggestion that we do enter certification, and then there was a suggestion that we not use certification because it could somehow interfere with the access that we have to interpreters who might go elsewhere where there are less stringent requirements. And in the last JCR report, you set out before us some very specific things that you could do. And one of them included regulations that would protect and serve the users of sign language interpreters, and that these regulations would be intended to help protect the public against the fraud and unskilled or unethical use of interpreters. But you have not yet promulgated any regulations. And so what I'm looking for is, are you waiting for the General Assembly, or do you need to wait for the General Assembly to do something? Or can you now, within the administrative authority that you have, set forth regulations to address this area of concern?
That is an excellent question. Thank you for that question. As you can recognize within the JCR report, there are various policy options that are available to the state. There are 18 possible elements within our office. And again, this is a conversation that is critical. We need to have this conversation on how to move from here. Historically, many states have set up regulations. And if we did that, it may be as robust as affirmative action that we could take, again, from our authority given to us by our statute. So the state legislature, it just depends if you would like us to move ahead in this way. We could develop a fully comprehensive legislation and law that asks us to establish the regs ourselves. We could, if you felt comfortable moving forward in this way. But again, we need more clear expectations from the state legislature and the General Assembly as to your wishes on what we should move forward from here. Again, I'm happy to discuss this issue further.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think after the hearing, if Executive Director Brick could, or the AGs, let us know, under current statute, can you promulgate regulations and you're just waiting for guidance, or do you actually need a statutory change to promulgate regulations?
Again, I'm happy to follow up on this with you. Thank you. That's a wonderful question.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from any other members of the committees? Okay, not seeing anyone else. I want to thank the department for coming to testify. We don't have anybody else signed up at this time to testify on this budget, so we will conclude the budget hearing for the Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing and move on to the budget for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. And we'll start with the analyst report from Samuel Quist.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me share my screen here. All right, you should all be able to see the presentation in front of you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Samuel Quist. I will be presenting the DLS analyst on the budget for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. Beginning with the first chart on page 1, this shows the budget in fiscal 22 increases by about $251,000 or 7.2% to a total of $3.7 million. This is made up of federal and general funds with a small share of special funding. The next chart on the next page shows an overview. The majority of agency spending covers personnel expenses. 3.2 million or 84% covers regular personnel expenses, and an additional 100,000 covers contractual personnel expenses. The remaining operating expenses cover cost allocations and about 322,000 of other operating expenses for the agency. The chart on the next page shows more details about the change in the budget in fiscal 22. The majority of change is in the personnel expense category. Part of this change is due to the contractual conversion of 2 positions. So on the bottom line of the chart, you can see there's a corresponding decrease to contractual personnel expenses of $86,000. The other change in the budget is a $90,000 increase in special funds. This is due to anticipated special fund revenue and expenses related to the agency's biennial civil rights gala event, which is scheduled for fiscal 2022. The next page, this just gives a summary of the personnel data reflecting the contractual conversion for the agency. And I will move on now to the MFR data on Exhibit 3. This shows the total education and outreach activities held by the Commission. In fiscal 2020, this total number declined slightly to 121. This decline was partly due to some disruptions caused by the pandemic while events were being transitioned to be conducted virtually. There was also some consolidation of events due to more time-consuming and more intensive topics being covered that resulted in less contacts overall. The next exhibit, Exhibit 4, this shows more of the agency's complaint data. So the green line on this chart is the total number of complaints received during the year, which increased slightly to 775. The colored bars on this chart show the breakdown of complaints closed by complaint type. The blue line is employment complaints, so you can see that is the vast majority. About 3/4 of all complaints are employment related. These numbers tend to fluctuate year to year for a variety of causes. And the employment complaints did decrease in fiscal 20. The housing increased slightly and the public accommodations stayed roughly the same or shows a slight decrease from fiscal 19. Part of this was due to staffing constraints. There was also some changes to the contracts with the EEOC, the federal partner for the agencies, that impacted some of the case closures in fiscal 20. Moving on to Exhibit 5, this shows the case processing time lines, the average days for processing of a case by category. While the agency continues to meet its obligations for its federal partnerships, these the average days to complete a case did increase in fiscal 20. This was primarily due to some staffing constraints, and the agency is also advised they have approximately 850 pending and open cases that they are currently working on, which has negatively impacted investigator caseloads. And this has also negatively impacted the timelines for processing a case. So moving on to the recommended action section, DLS is making one recommendation to the committee that the committees request a brief status update later on in the year that will provide an update on the current status of the number of cases that are currently pending and open, as well as the status of investigator caseloads and the time frame for resolving these caseloads. And I believe that concludes my presentation. And with that, I will be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Are there any questions for the analyst from the committee? Delegate Valentino Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. I may have missed this, Mr. Quest. Do they have open pins for case managers now that they're not hiring? Or do they need pins for case managers?
I believe that should be on the page with the personnel data, page 4. It looks like I think these pins, when I looked last for January 2021, they should be all filled. The problem, I believe, was there were some that were open during the year, but I believe we can ask the agency as well, but I believe they should be all filled currently.
So they should be up to speed on case managers. Thank you.
I'm sorry, excuse me. My name is Nicolette Young. To answer your question, we currently do have 2 vacancies for.
The department will have an opportunity to present in a minute. We're just asking questions of the analyst. If he doesn't know, we can re-ask the question.
Mr. Chair, you're
You have to unmute, Mr. Chair.
Sorry. Seeing as there are no other questions, let's move on to the presentation from the department and the response to the analyst report, along with other questions. We're going to bring up Glendora Hughes, Nicolette Young, and Alvin Gilliard. So whomever is presenting, please go ahead and begin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Chairperson Reznik, Chairperson Griffith. Thank you, members of the both committees. We thank you for this opportunity to respond to the Department of Legislative Services fiscal year 2022 budget analysis. We would like to thank our assigned analyst, Mr. Samuel Quist, for his thorough analysis. As has been the case in recent years, the current realities of this spending plan presents challenges, but notwithstanding those challenges, MCCR respectfully requests the subcommittee's support in concurring with the governor's allowance for MCCR in his FY22 budget. And we're certainly happy to answer any questions members of the committee may have.
Thank you very much. So with that, why don't we go ahead and jump right back to the question that was asked about the positions. Ms. Young, please, I know you wanted to address it, and we'd love to hear your answer.
Thank you, and I do apologize for that earlier. Currently, we do have 2 investigators in our case processing unit that are those 2 vacancies that we're actually recruiting for right now. So hopefully we will have those vacancies filled this spring. So those particular vacancies will help us with our case backlog.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Are there any additional questions? Delegate Valentino Smith, I imagine you have a follow-up.
Thank you. Yes. If you could just then give us, a 6-month update then on where you are with the 850 cases after you hire, that would be helpful. And with respect to the cases that proceeded, if you could send our analyst what the findings, general findings were and penalties that were assessed or not. In other words, the percentage of cases that actually go on to show a successful result or not based on the case. And in particular for public accommodations, looking at small businesses and what businesses and the types of fines that may be being waged against them would be helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Any additional questions from any of the committee members? Okay, seeing none. Just confirming there are none. There are none. All right, sounds good. Well, thank you very much to the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. We appreciate your testimony and the answering the questions. We are now going to move on to the Maryland boards, professional boards and commissions, and the analyst report from Andrew Garrison. Andrew, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I pull up the hearing here again, or the meeting here, again, Andrew Garrison with the Department of Legislative Services. And there we go. Can you all see that all right? Excellent.
Yes, that looks good.
All right, perfect. So here with the health occupation boards, we were looking at actually collectively 20 boards and 2 commissions in the Department of Health, and they are predominantly special funded, and that's what we're showing here on this first chart. Those yellow bars special funded. We have 2 generally funded agencies in this budget, but most of these special funds are derived through licensing fees and other sort of revenues that are going to the boards and in their special fund balances. Given that they have a largely regulatory role, a lot of the expenditures are going towards personnel across these boards, looking at the regular employee complement and then those contractual employees together. That takes up 70% of the collective expenditures that we have here for the boards and commissions.
Andrew, interrupt you for 1 second. I need to apologize to everyone. There was a individual signed up to testify unfavorably on the civil rights budget, and I totally missed it, and I apologize. If we can backtrack for 1 second, if Mr. Vince McAvoy is still on. Nick, can you help out? Is he still with us?
Let me check for you. Just give me a moment.
Yeah, I apologize, everyone. I'm flipping between 2 screens, between the Zoom screen and the witness list, and I missed it.
I believe he has left. I don't believe he is with us anymore.
I apologize. Try and keep that to a minimum. I hate to have that keep happening. I believe that Mr. McAvoy was only signed up to testify orally, so maybe we can reach out to him if we have his contact information and ask him to submit something in writing. That would be ideal, and we can distribute that to the committee. Let's continue on with Andrew's testimony on the boards and commissions.
Sure thing. Let's get back to our analysis. Excellent. So we were here looking at the overall agency's expenditures. Again, by and large, the boards and commissions are doing licensing and renewals, and so a lot of those expenditures are coming in on the personnel side. We had about a $2.5 million decrease in their collective budgets this year, and we can actually attribute most of that, almost all of it, 2.4 million of that 2.5, to the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission here. There was a lot of one-time expenditures in fiscal 21 that are coming off the books here in 22, which is really driving that decrease that we're seeing. Additionally, we have a BRFA proposal that pertains to the health occupation boards. So when the governor introduced his budget, he included some contingent reductions elsewhere in the health department, and he's backfilling those general fund reductions from fund balance transfers from these board special funds. They're totaling $8.5 million. And the two largest are coming from the Medical Cannabis Commission, as well as the counselors and therapists of $6 and $2 million respectively. And those are going to backfill contingent reductions in BHA's budget. And then there's also a $500,000 reduction, fund balance transfer from the Board of Pharmacy, supporting a contingent reduction in the Office of Controlled Substance Administration in the Department of Public Health Secretary's budget. And so what we are doing on this chart here is we're showing the fund balance as they closed fiscal 20, their allowance at 22, and then we're also accounting for some of those fund balance transfers. Generally, what we want to look for in these fund balances is maintaining a fund balance of around 30 to 20% of the expenditures. And this is to account for sort of any unexpected costs from lawsuits or other larger special projects. And actually, this is particularly important this year. During the coronavirus pandemic, the governor issued an executive order that delayed renewals for a lot of professional licensing boards, including a lot of these health occupation boards. And while we do believe that ultimately these revenues will return to the boards, they are pushed off until the end of the pandemic or the lifting of the executive order. So maintaining a fund balance and being able to continue operations throughout the period is really important. And so focusing in on the Board of Pharmacy there, kind of towards the middle of the screen, the prior BRFA actually authorized fund balance transfers both in 21 and 22 for the Board of Pharmacy. When we were looking at the budget, those fund balance transfers were targeted towards Medicaid to a program for small rural pharmacies. And those special fund availabilities weren't reflected there in 22. DLS is still under the impression that BRFA from last year will be enforced and that fund balance transfer will continue going forward. So we've already taken that out of the adjusted fund balance for the Board of Pharmacy. And then if we look at the governor's current BRFA proposal for that extra $500,000, that then brings the Board of Pharmacy down to 20% of expenditures, which is lower levels than we're traditionally comfortable with, especially given some of the revenue uncertainty going forward for these boards. And so with that in mind, what DLS is recommending here with the BRFA is rejecting that proposal in this current BRFA to the Office of Controlled Substances Administration and enforcing that BRFA transfer in that was authorized in 2020 for fiscal 22. And then to offset that, what we're recommending is a fund balance transfer from the Board of Psychologists of $700,000, and to send that also to BHA for community mental health services, like the other two that the governor has authorized this year, or that the governor has proposed this year, rather. The other thing I wanted to highlight here is looking at the functions of these boards and how they're meeting some of these licensing, investigation, and renewal goals. And what I'm showing here is the number of boards that have missed each one of these goals in the last 5 fiscal years. And you can see that the investigation goals, the ones in blue, have presented the most challenges for the boards. I would also like to just highlight that this isn't necessarily evenly distributed. What we've done here is we've looked at boards that have missed in one of these goals at least twice in the last 5 years and how frequently that's occurred. So again, investigations is showing where a lot of the problems are, but the Board of Dental Examiners and the Board of Pharmacists have missed in all 3 areas with some regularity when we're looking at these goals. And one way that has a possibility of addressing that is this a joint licensing and regulatory management project. This is something that's sort of been in discussion within this agency for going back to about fiscal 15. And over the time, various larger boards have sort of opted out of the project or elected to go and use their own individual IT system and not some sort of shared service that could be used across all of these boards. And last year, in the budget presented to the General Assembly, we were actually expecting a pretty significant movement towards this project. And those are those red bars in the middle. That's what we were expecting last year. And it was about $800,000 to go towards this project. And what ended up happening, shown in those green bars at the end, in the budget we're looking at currently, is just oversight costs. And what that did is that pushed out a lot of those other expenditures now into fiscal 24. We do only anticipate just about $1 million to get this project over the line, but it's now being spread out over 2 years and further delayed. And so given those delays and the continued sort of pushing back of this project, what DLS is recommending is committee narrative about this project, both which boards are going to be involved, who will be able to benefit from it, who will be able to fund it, and a project timeline, as well as some milestones that will get us to a completed joint licensure system in 24. This is actually particularly relevant because the Office of Legislative Audits released an audit on the 22nd for the health regulatory commissions, the health regulatory boards, health professional boards and commissions, and they also found had several findings with regards particularly to IT services. They found that some individual systems were either individuals had access to them that perhaps shouldn't have, either they no longer worked in a licensing capacity or no longer with the licensing board in some cases. Some individuals were able to unilaterally approve licensees or renewals. There was some data security issues as well flagged by OLA, as well as some procurement issues with the Board of Dental Examiners' most recent procurement of their own licensure system. And taking all of their findings together, OLA's last finding was actually that the boards themselves should look at some sort of collective shared services or shared operations for projects like these and for some of their other work. The OLA used the point of comparison for the Department of Labor, which also has a bunch of professional boards, and they use one service and one sort of system for all of this, while on the other side, the health occupation boards, by OLA's counting, have procured 7 separate licensing systems. And then this joint project, again, has been pushed now for the 4th or 5th consecutive fiscal year. And then so ultimately, what DLS's recommendations are again, that committee narrative on the licensing management system. And then below that, we have those 2 BRFA recommendations, the first of which is to strike the governor's proposal in this current BRFA due to concerns about the Board of Pharmacy's fund balance, and then to offset that with a BRFA action to use $700,000 in fund balance transfers, also going towards the Behavioral Health Administration. That concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Any questions for the analyst? All right, seeing none, let's bring up the department. We have a long list of folks to testify today. We're going to start with Jordan Butler, Stephen Colby, Kimberly Link, and I believe that Webster Yee is standing in for Dennis Schrader today. So we'll start with the 4 of you as a panel, though we're not organized entirely as panels right now, and do questions there and then move on to the next group. So why don't we start with Webster?
Yep.
Congratulations on your promotion, Assistant Secretary.
I'll trade it for more sleep, Mr. Chairman, any day. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair. Very quickly, just to run through this, we obviously will have over a month's worth of discussions with the 2 budget subcommittees. With me are Jordan Butler, our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Tolbert of the Cannabis Commission, Ms. Smith of the Board of Psychologists, and then we have a long list of people for questions. In general, we support the governor's budget, and we encourage the budget commissions or budget committees favorable consideration of the governor's budget. We have submitted our 3 responses to the 2 committees, and with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Butler to go through them.
Okay, so the first item that we were asked to comment on is DLS's recommendation to strike the BRFA language of 2021 that would generate $500,000 in general fund savings by transferring $500,000 from the Board of Pharmacy to our public health budget. We respectfully disagree with that recommendation. We do think that this transfer in this general fund savings is a feasible action to take. The best practice for the specially funded boards are that they should be maintaining a closing fund balance of 20 to 30% of their annual operating budget. This $500,000 transfer that is recommended by the governor that would actually leave the Board of Pharmacy with exactly 20% of its operating budget in its fund balance. And so it does fall within that best practice. There are 2 other transfers that last year's BRFA also effectuates, and we feel that this third transfer of $500,000 is a feasible one, and it does generate a little bit of general fund savings for the state. The second item is related to a $700,000 fund balance transfer from the Board of Psychologists. And for this item, I will actually turn to Lorraine Smith, who is the Executive Director of the Board of Psychologists, for her comments.
Ms. Smith, I know I didn't call on you earlier, but I realized that you were signed up to testify as part of this panel. So go ahead and present and comment, if you will.
She is not in the meeting right now. She did not enter the meeting.
Oh,
she's
okay.
signed up. She's signed up on the witness list and on the agenda, so she should have gotten the email, but she's not here right now.
Okay. Well, if she jumps back, then we can bring her back in, and then let me go to, instead of the names I called, let me go to Will Tilburg first, if he is here to comment, and then we can go back to the rest of the list.
Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, members of the committees, Will Tilburg here, Executive Director for the Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission. Within the DLS analysis report on page 8, there was discussion of reductions in contractual staff at the commission. And so just 3 minor points today. And the first is a clarification there. There actually is not a reduction in contractual staff. There was a comment about since licensing is nearing ending, as a number of licenses within the medical cannabis program are capped, that the need for investigative services would be decreasing. This is in fact not the case. The investigators that we have perform background checks before licensing and then inspections after licensing. In addition, these same inspectors provide financial and criminal background checks on transfers of ownership, which we've seen significant increases in over the past 12 months. So we do anticipate that the number of investigative staff will continue moving forward. The second point, to address Mr. Garrison's comment about the legislative audit finding regarding joint licensing system. The Maryland Medical Cannabis Commission has joined the joint licensing system that he referenced with DLLR and their various boards and commissions for One Stop Maryland. And as of next month, February 16th is the current live date, we will be transferring over to that joint system with, I think it's about 30 other state agencies. So we've heeded that advice, and it's a 2-year project that is nearing completion. Finally, not referenced in this year's report, but was a topic over the last 3 years, was diversity within the Maryland Medical Cannabis Program. And last year at this hearing, I was asked to provide an update on the status of claims of bias and undue influence in the licensing application process, and said that we had commissioned independent investigators to review those claims. The independent investigator that we hired performed a 6-month investigation, including interviews of applicants, of reviewers at Morgan State University and MMCC staff and commissioners, and released a report publicly in September that made clear there was no undue influence or bias in the application review process. Based on that, the commission awarded 3 additional grower licenses and 8 additional processor licenses on October 1st of 2020 for 11 total new licenses. Each of those licenses were awarded to a majority, minority, or women-owned firm. Of those 11, 9 were African-American firms, 5 were majority women firms. And so that drastically changes the diversity makeup of the license holders within the program to now more than 1/3 of the total number of grower licenses are held by minority or women owners, and more than 1/2 of the processor licenses in the state are majority owned by minority and women owners. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have on that or other matters.
Wonderful, thank you. And I understand that Ms. Lorraine Smith is back and with us, and we'll turn it over to her.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Hi, I'm Lorraine Smith, and I'm the Executive Director of the Psychology Board. And I wanted to comment on the recommendation to reduce the board's budget by $700,000 in order to fund a local mental health programs. Well, the board is asking, respectfully ask that this request be denied or stricken because the board actually needs these funds for several tasks. Number one, the board currently has several cases in the Office of Attorney General's office to be processed, and that's going to be expensive. Our renewal fees may be waived or even reduced this fiscal year as well as next fiscal year because of COVID-19. Meanwhile, our expenditures continue to be incurred. The third reason is that the board has unbudgeted IT expenses. Well, as you know, there is, it's in the making to actually develop a new technology, a new computerized licensing system, and that will cost money. And even if the joint one doesn't happen or if it's postponed, the board itself is actually in the process of enhancing what we currently have in place. And that requires our funds as well. So we would have to draw down on the funds that we have in order to make that happen. And finally, I'm happy to report, the board is finally fully staffed. We had some vacancies, but currently we are fully staffed. And we plan to and expect to and anticipate remaining that way during fiscal year 2021 as well as 2022. So therefore, the board respectfully asks that you strongly consider what we're asking, that our funds are allowed to remain in the budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So for this panel, I do want to start with a question to Webster Yee and Jordan Butler with regard to the issue that Andrew brought up in his report on the disparate IT systems that have been popping up throughout the boards. What is the status of the unified tracking system, and why did the department allow all of this money to be spent on multiple licensing and tracking systems when the plan was put in place to have a single unified system?
I'll respond to that. So this has been an issue that I've discussed with these two committees year after year. MDH headquarters, we completely agree with you. We feel that the boards and commissions, they should be collaborating with OET and with DoIT to use the one-stop portal that DoIT has set up for all agencies statewide. We think that the inconsistent systems across all of the health occupation boards and commissions are leading to system failures here and there. There are boards that have brand new systems, but they're different from other new systems. There are boards that quite literally are using systems from the early 90s, from the late 90s that are failing pretty regularly. And we completely agree with you. We think that the one-stop portal that DoIT has set up and has been implementing in other agencies should be the one piece of technology that the health occupation boards should also be using to modernize their systems and to bring consistency across all of the boards. Unfortunately, because of how the boards are established in Maryland statute, MDH headquarters and the MDH secretary has a limited amount of authority over coercing the boards into using DoIT's one-stop portal. And so, it hasn't been without trying. We've been trying to get the boards to tap into this technology since I've been with the department to no avail. And last year there was a bill that I think the department was in support of to more or less do what the DLS analyst is recommending, which we do concur with, by the way, is to come up with a report exploring the feasibility of using the one-stop portal for the boards and establishing a timeline and a budget plan for getting this underway. At this point, I've said a lot already, but ultimately, I think this is a board issue that I would ultimately have to defer to the boards to adequately respond to your question for why the boards aren't using this technology.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just briefly add in one item. We wanted to thank Senator Eckert for being the Senate sponsor of Senate Bill 262. I believe it passed second reading on Tuesday, Senator, and then it's going, I'm assuming, over to the House afterwards. The House is considered the House cross-file, which I believe is House Bill 224. And we also have available with us Mr. Steve Colby, who has been, to some degree, volunteered over to us with the COVID vaccine effort from the Department of Information Technology. So he can also lend insights to the committee if they have any questions about this project.
Okay, well, do we know where that bill is going in the House? Is that going to HGO?
It's been heard in HGO, Mr. Chairman. I don't know what HGO is doing.
I think, Mr. Chair, if I might enter in, I think Delegate Krebs is carrying that bill. And I believe it passed last year over in the House, if I'm not mistaken. We just didn't get it to the finish line. So we'd like to see that moved along expeditiously because we do in fact believe that it would move this project and expedite, as I said before, the renewal of licenses. And some of those technology systems really are obsolete. We need to be able to be more interactive and responsive.
Well, thank you for that. I think we've also wasted a ton of money creating all these different systems across all these different boards when we had a system already in place. So I am curious to hear from some of the boards as to why they haven't chosen to use that system. And that might lend us to a better understanding of how we might move them over. Let's move to Chair Griffith. You have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question or comment was right along with yours, and just kind of what's taking so long for us all to get on the same page in this regard. I know that Webster, you guys have been crazy busy all interim, but I know that the department is aware that there are a couple of pieces of legislation that I'm cross-filing with Delegate Pena-Melnick. One will deal with data collection from the boards and commissions around diversity so that we make sure that we're recruiting and maintaining a diverse workforce of professionals and those that hold licenses. And the other deals with implicit bias for our healthcare professionals training. And so one of the things that I think would be helpful as we talk about a centralized IT system is also, assuming those bills are successful, but even if they're not, it would be helpful for us to have data collected in a uniform way so that we're able to make data-based decisions moving forward about where there might be gaps or needs. And so, Mr. Chairman, I just want to support that comment that you made and add to it that it's potential saving of money and time as we look to get more organized in data moving forward. My question that I will ask, since you adequately addressed that one, is for Mr. Tilburg, if he's still here. I mean, he's
yes,
not.
I am.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you for your report. I was going to ask that, and you got to most of what I would have asked. The only thing I had remaining was based on the information that you reported today and that you've reported out since the fall. Are all of the contested issues now resolved as it pertains to minority licensure and participation in medical cannabis? Have we resolved all of the cases and concerns that had been initiated during round 1 and round 2 of that complex process?
Sure. The following the award on October 1st of those 11 pre-approvals for licensure, the commission also denied certain applicants who had inconsistent or conflicting information in their applications or failed to provide certain required information. Those applicants were provided the right to an administrative hearing. And so of the, excuse me, it was 9 actually that had that. And of those, 5 have requested those administrative hearings. So those are still ahead of us and will be scheduled in the coming months. In addition, there are, from the initial license application period in 2019, I think there were 11 different lawsuits filed. Most of them have been resolved at this point. Every case that's been resolved has been in the favor of the commission. But there are still 3 that I believe are outstanding, and we're hoping for resolution in the coming couple of months.
Thank you so much for that. And Mr. Chairman, I would just ask Mr. Tilburg if you would please keep us posted as those matters get resolved one way or the other. I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Valentino Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, Assistant Secretary. We go way back. We started on judiciary together, didn't we? I'm concerned about the audit findings, and maybe because I sit on the Joint Audit Committee, so I continue to see these things over and over, and then we get to budget committees. I saw Mr. Daggett on, but I don't know if he was still, oh, there he is. He's still in the, so we've got audit findings that have to do with the nursing board and the Board of Professional Counselors, but really missing the mark on renewal of licenses and investigations. And I'm trying to understand the organization. Is the MDH at the top, you guys at the top line that we see there, secretary and assistant secretaries, do you then oversee and communicate down to these boards, you know, making sure they're making improvement in these areas? Or are they operating independently and just reporting to you? But I'm trying to understand why we're continuing to have 100%, you know, showing in the frequency of years for these missed goals for some of these boards.
Yes.
I think I'll defer to Mr. Doggett.
Yes, hi, thank you. I am Fred Doggett. I'm the Inspector General. I'm assuming you can see and hear me.
Yes, we can.
All right, great. Well, thank you. It's a terrific question, Delegate, and thank you for that. It's probably the most complicated thing that that the Office of Inspector General faces with regard to our normal audit realm. So we do have a limited, very limited agreement that we pounded out with the boards and with the AG's office as to what the Office of Inspector General routinely can look at or can look at on a basis without further discussion, and that mostly involves conduct of MDH employees who happen to be working at the board, or whether in a complaint situation, whether the board followed the process that it has laid out online. With regard to some of these other issues, these basic management issues, no, we don't really have the authority to go independently and look at them. What we will do and have done is work with them to try and respond to OLA and to try to put a reasonable corrective actions in place. We will give them our advice on those matters. But it is it's a great question. It's very frustrating to us, and I know it's not a satisfying answer, but that's kind of where we are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And
sorry.
Madam Vice Chair, we also have Karen Evans, the Executive Director of the Board of Nursing, and Danielle Vallon of the Board of Professional Counselors, who can probably answer your questions there too.
Okay, well, why don't we continue on with the list of folks signed up to testify, and if others have additional information they can provide, maybe we can follow up afterwards and provide that information either in emails or meetings, okay? With that, are there any additional questions for that panel? All right, seeing none, or let me verify that I'm seeing none. Let's move on to Kimberly Link, Stephen Colby, Christine Fairley, and Leslie Taylor. We'll start with Ms. Link.
Good afternoon. I'm Kim Link. I'm the liaison to the boards and commissions on behalf of the department. I'm here for questions only. Thank you, Mr.
Well, we love that kind of testimony. Thank you very much. We'll move on to Mr. Colby.
Just taking myself off mute. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Ms. Vice Chair. Steve Colby, for the record, is the Chief Technology Officer for the Maryland Department of Health. I am here for questions only, but if I may take a personal liberty, my first day with Department of Health was on Friday. Formerly, I was with the Department of Information Technology as the department's Assistant Secretary. I was part of the strategy team that put together the one-stop portal that we were speaking of. And also, I spent about a year as the contract manager for the One Stop Portal, and I can tell you that it's a good platform. I certainly am not speaking on behalf of Do It, obviously, because I'm no longer part of that organization. But I'm very proud of the work that I did during my time as Do It, building the statewide licensing platform. Thank you very much.
So, Mr. Colby, since you have volunteered that information, let me ask you, have you had conversations with the various boards as to why they have not engaged with the one-stop platform?
Not during my time as contract manager. I was a part of it very early on, so I couldn't speak with firsthand knowledge. And again, I would for the specifics, I would encourage the committee to engage the Department of Information Technology. But I can tell you my role is in Department of Health. I'm enthusiastic about working with Do It to build on our partnership, and I'm looking forward to looking at ways that we can enhance our our position relative to the statewide licensing system.
All right, thank you. Let's move on to Ms. Fairley. I broke my own rules. I apologize. I asked a question out of the order of the panel. But let's move on to the rest of the panel that I called, and then we can look at questions afterwards. So Ms. Fairley.
Again, Christine Fairley, Board of Physicians, Executive Director. I think our report actually looks pretty good this year. So I don't have any comments unless there's questions for the board. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Let's go to Ms. Leslie Taylor.
Good afternoon. I'm from the Board of Physicians. I'm only here for questions.
Okay, this is going along swimmingly. Ms. Smith has already spoken. All right, so for that group, are there any questions for the panel that we just saw? Seeing none, I believe. All right, let's move on then to Dina Spites Napata. Hope I pronounced that correctly. I apologize if I didn't.
Yes, I'm here for information only.
Thank you. Danielle Vallone, I believe that was Lorraine Smith. So Mr. Doggett, I know you'd already spoken before to answer a question, but do you have additional information to present?
I do not. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. So that brings us to one last individual signed up to testify, Rachel Faulkner.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Rachel Faulkner here with the Licensed Clinical Professional Counselors of Maryland. You have my written testimony, so I'll try to keep it to bullet points. I just want to say, I think we're talking about two different things that are really related. We spent a lot of time talking about IT systems and needing the boards to upgrade. At the same time, the budget analyst did talk about a $2 million transfer from the Board of Professional Counselors and Therapists to the Behavioral Health Administration. So I want to make clear that the Board of Professional Counselors and Therapists, from our standpoint, is one of these boards that's using really antiquated systems, can't do a lot of really basic functions we would expect Health Occupation Board to be able to do. I've got some examples in my testimony. If there is a cost associated with an IT systems upgrade, we would hope that that would be considered when making a decision about transferring funds. I'd also be remiss if I didn't say this out loud. I know you know this, particularly the veteran members on these two budget committees. These are licensing fees that licensed health professionals paid into the board to support the functioning of the board, to support licensees. And so we are in opposition to the transfer to the Behavioral Health Administration. And I would ask that if a decision is ultimately made to transfer those dollars, we would ask for some budget narrative, committee narrative language to look at what the fee structure is with the board, because if there is a large fund balance, it may be that the board is overcharging licensees. And we want to make sure that there's a right balance with having a fund balance that supports the board, but that is also fair to the licensees in the fees that they're paying. And I'd like to say that we're on the record as supporting both the House and Senate bills regarding having a common IT platform. We think it's super important. Our applications come to the board in the mail, which means we have to call the board when we've got questions about our applications. The board spends a lot of time working with people to figure out where in the process their application is. During COVID, staff are going into the buildings to pick up mail. We think this may be delaying the processing of applications. Certainly upgrades could be happening all around, and we absolutely support the use of board dollars for board functions. So with that, I'd also like to say, I'd be remiss, this is my first opportunity to testify before the budget committees, and I think having the joint budget hearings is wonderful, and I really hope you consider it for future years.
Well, we appreciate that. We do love our Senate colleagues. Are there any questions from either committee, subcommittee, for any of the panelists that have preceded us on this budget? All right, not seeing, Senator Eckert.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you, boards, for being here, for the good work you've done in the pandemic. I just want to, say a shout out to the Board of Nursing. Is the Board of Nursing, Ms. Evans, the only one that's working with Do It, or are there other boards who've been actively working with Do It to get this platform up and running? Did everybody hear me?
We do hear you.
Okay.
I don't know if the person who you are asking is still on.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I can't see everybody in one screen, so.
Right.
Senator Eckert, to my knowledge, I think the Board of Nursing is the only one currently working with Do It right now.
Okay, so I just want to say, hats off to them for initiating that and moving forward in that arena. Good model for everybody else. I'm one of those people who've been around a long time. We've been talking about this since, I think, the early 90s. So like to see that happen. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Chair.
Any other questions? All right, I don't see any other. So with that, I would like to thank everyone who testified on these budgets. I believe we are back next week for the next set. And at that time, Chair Griffith will be running the meeting and you'll have to hear my voice. So I'm very excited about that. I want to thank everyone for coming and I appreciate it. And if she's still on, I want to thank Chairwoman McIntosh for joining us for this as well. And we are adjourned.